Steven,
Yes?
what episode are we doing today for episode number 7? What's the topic?
Well, Aaron, I can't hear you because my headphones are on the couch behind me. But today's episode is to medicate or not to medicate? That is the question. Yes. This mask
Interesting.
smells kind of funky.
You see what I mean? You got to be crazy. Too late to be sane. You got to go full tilt bozo. Because you're only given a little spark of madness.
We are attention.
If you lose that, you're nothing.
Attention.
Pay attention!
From me to you, don't ever lose that. Because it keeps you alive.
Different.
Set your time timer, 40 minutes.
All right. In classic ADHD fashion, my time timer is about 10 feet to my left.
Then I'll just set mine. How about
You set yours.
I'll set mine. I'll
Great.
monitor it. Because actually 2 time timers is a little nuts. Boom. We're doing that. All right.
All right.
Sounds good. So, to medicate or not to medicate?
That is the question.
Yes. And I hear that question a bunch from
All the time.
parents, teens, people that are newly diagnosed. It's one of those things we're not told a whole lot, especially, I don't know how your diagnostic process went, but
Yeah, we'll get to that.
doctors, one of their specialties is not how to communicate effectively to their patients, because psychiatrists or pediatricians, in my experience, oftentimes I have way more questions from the people who come to see me, and confusion about what is ADHD and what do I do and should I
Right.
take medications? I don't even know what these drugs are,
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. And they have all these questions. And I feel like that's more of the standard than it is the exception to the rule.
Definitely.
So that's where we are kind of starting from, is let's answer some of these questions, both from personal experience and some professional experience. I mean, me as a coach, what can we talk to people about medicating and the struggle with that? How can we relate to that? So you want to take this?
Yeah. I'd love to start it off. To springboard right off of what you mentioned, it's a conversation I have often. In fact, so often I can quote a conversation I had an hour ago with someone in England about this very discussion topic, to medicate or not to medicate. Just within the U.S. alone, it's a massive question. You get outside of our country, and it's an even more bizarro world out there regarding treatments and medication. In the U.S., at least, there is a habit, perhaps an unhealthy habit, of primary care physicians, or PCPs, doing the diagnosing and prescribing, which is technically not the way you should go about it. Many psychiatrists, who are the folks who should be prescribing and diagnosing mental conditions, will tell you that they are made uneasy by the percentage of young boys and girls diagnosed by PCPs instead of psychiatrists, or at the very least a psychologist, right?
And just to jump in, the percentage is really around 90% are diagnosed from their PCP.
Oh, wait a minute. We hit another one of those vast majority percentages. Okay, I was really, for the listeners, I was really tiptoeing around what I was just saying. And with Aaron's statistic there, I can pretty much erase the tenor of tiptoeing and be like, yo, it's a up problem. No. Scratch the F.
And there's not as many.
It's a 90. Yeah.
In some areas, especially rural areas, there's not as many like actual psychiatrists for children and adolescents, let alone adults who know ADHD, and adults know how to prescribe for adult ADHD or diagnose for adult ADHD. So there's this gap. There's this huge gap actually in the amount of people who can actually do this work and specialize in it.
There was an audience member. I don't think he was on the panel in 2015's Chad that you and I met at. Actually, he was on the panel, and he's a doctor in his mid to late 50s, but I think a PCP or a GP if you're in Europe, right? He has ADHD, but was diagnosed in his 30s or 40s, like really late on in life. And it, it was one of those classic stories that made total sense. It brought so much clarity to his life. But he's a very accomplished private practice doctor. And he laughingly reminisced on the panel for us his med school days and the length of the section on abnormal psychology, like the
and
length
ADHD. I think
Yeah.
wasn't it like one class or something? He said
that was the point. There wasn't a section on ADHD.
Yeah.
There was a small chapter on like aneurotypical conditions, and they were all lumped into a couple pages at the end of the book. And yeah, he essentially had a class on it. And someone asked, is that still the case? And he said, while I don't know 100% for sure, I regret to inform that it's pretty damn close to that. Like that we haven't made a whole lot of progress since the 70s in educating med students in mental conditions. And the US, ironically, happens to be one of the more informed first world countries when it comes to mental conditions. And still, we don't do a great job of giving a full picture, a full spectrum.
And a lot of doctors think they know ADHD. They know about it. They've seen it. But just seeing it and being aware that it exists is different from actually knowing the nuances, knowing how to treat it, knowing how to diagnose it, knowing what other conditions can look like ADHD, because there's certain thyroid conditions, there's certain other types of disorders that mimic symptoms of ADHD.
Physical traumas. PTSD,
head traumas.
Head traumas, various forms of
PTSD, trauma, exactly. Tons of things. Medical, sleep deprivation. So lots of things can...
We talked about that in another episode. Sleep deprivation can look a heck of a lot like...
But let's bring this back to, all right, so we know
so
that...
to medicate or not to medicate.
Well,
this
so we know that there's...
one.
Right, there's problems with the actual physicians and how this is diagnosed and how medications are prescribed or even explained to people. But, okay.
I would say that's problem number 2, probably. Problem number 1 is the diagnosis and prescription. Problem number 2 is education about the meds.
Yeah. And I think that's what we can talk about today is like, let's talk about what are the meds and how we ourselves have grappled with that question and what we've done about it. Because that's probably a thing people want to know is, are we on meds? Have we tried meds? What meds? Where are we at with this?
Yeah. Do you want to start?
Sure. Like, so for me, I was diagnosed at a young age as well, 7, 8 years old, and immediately put on Ritalin because Ritalin was the medication of choice. There really wasn't many options out there, and it was immediate release Ritalin. And then I believe it was around in 4th grade, 5th grade, they also put me on Wellbutrin because of behavioral issues and that kind of stuff. And Wellbutrin is a kind of atypical antidepressant, but it also, even though it's not, and well, before I get into the medications, I'll just say a disclaimer real quick that this is from my personal perspective. So obviously anything I say today, you definitely want to like check with your doctor before acting on any of this stuff, or, walking in and being like, hey, Aaron said this, like prescribe me this medication. It sounds great. Back to this. So I was prescribed Wellbutrin for a while.
Is it Wellbutrin, sorry to interject, also an anti-anxiety? Or is it just because I have a family member who also was prescribed Wellbutrin and
anxiety and depression. They typically prescribe about the same drugs for anxiety and depression. The most commonly prescribed medication is SSRIs, like Zoloft, Prozac, those kind of classes of drugs. And for folks who don't respond well to those types of drugs, then there's Wellbutrin. Wellbutrin has been shown to have a secondary benefit for focus and attention. And they don't really know exactly why, but some people who can't tolerate stimulants well don't respond well to things like Ritalin, Adderall, those kind of...
Amphetamines,
methylphenidate. So sometimes they're prescribed Wellbutrin. And I've had clients that have not had great experiences on any kind of antidepressants, but have found benefit either in the combination of Wellbutrin and a stimulant medication or even just Wellbutrin alone. I just want to talk about the general classes medication real quick. So
Great.
There's two classes of ADHD medications. There's the stimulants and the non-stimulants. The stimulants include methylphenidate and amphetamine-based medications or dextroamphetamine, dexedrine, dextroamphetamine-based medications. Those medications...
If you will for a second, where do all these come from? The stimulants.
What do you mean?
Ritalin.
The pharmacy?
Benzedrine. No. Like the history, the who's the grandfather of all these? An amphetamine, Benzedrine, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Ritalin, the one you were put on first, a stimulant, was one of the first ADHD drug.
Yeah. So those are the stimulants essentially. Then the type 2, the class 2 of ADHD meds are the non-stimulants. The non-stimulants include things like Intuniv, Strattera, and that's essentially guanfacine and 10X. 10X is basically like a blood pressure medication. Those medications try to mitigate symptoms through the norepinephrine pathways versus stimulants that try to mitigate symptoms through dopamine pathways and preventing the dopamine reuptake. Dopamine is important.
Me of a critical fact. Okay,
right.
So the separation there is between norepinephrine and dopamine.
Right. And dopamine, for the stimulant class of medications, dopamine is helpful in attention, sustaining attention, focus, energy, and motivation, and follow through. And it also has a bit of a calming effect sometimes for mood regulation. Now, norepinephrine, it's about emotional regulation, emotional control, as well as impulse control, and it has a bit of a sedating effect, especially the non-stimulant ADHD meds have a bit of a sedating effect. So the main side effects to the stimulant medications are decreased appetite, troubles falling asleep or staying asleep, sleep difficulties, maybe a bit of a racing feeling. Sometimes people complain about it changing their personality a bit, but once you kind of get used to it, it usually doesn't change your personality in a dramatic way. You just might feel a bit focused and kind of in a tunnel sometimes, like you have a bit of a tunnel vision with things.
Yeah, only recently have psychiatrists, neurologists started accepting this idea that personality is fluid, that personality might be context-based and not fixed. For a very, very long time, modern psychology and modern neurology believe that personality is a fixed
trait,
characteristic, right? A fixed trait. Your personality at a certain point in your life fixed, and that was it. And now we're discovering and we're learning and we're reevaluating, and it looks more like personality is a fluid trait that, depending on the context you're in, your personality may shift. When changing perhaps a dose of medication or when starting stimulant medication, you may feel a personality shift, but that over time your body adjusts to it and you sort of learn to grapple with that in a more healthy way.
Yeah, you do get used to it. And has that been your experience with medications?
Well, I'll start by saying that you and I had similar beginnings. I was diagnosed in the South, in Texas, and I think because of that, there was a bit of a lag on education and progression through the new forms of treatment, medication, etc. So I was put on Ritalin when I was 10, so like 2001 was when I was diagnosed officially by a psychiatrist and was then prescribed Ritalin by my PCP. And that was a little bit of a gray area. So my pediatrician, whom, side note, I loved, had a great, healthy, very open relationship with my pediatrician. I was very lucky. He prescribed Ritalin. The psychiatrist diagnosed me officially as ADD, and it was ADD at the time, not ADHD. And I was told, again, God love that man, the pediatrician, but he did believe that my ADHD would go away between the age of about 15 to 19, essentially through puberty. That after my teenage years, ADD would be gone, and I would only need to medicate essentially 5 to 10 years between the age of 10 and 20.
So he gave you some bad advice there.
It was bad, maybe a little heavy-handed on his part. I think misinformed, uninformed, just naive information. So yeah, well, I started Ritalin.
That's
Go
what
ahead.
doctors thought at that time, but we know now that that's not true, that ADHD is a lifelong condition for most people. And
Yes.
while the research puts the number in 65% or over, and I think that's extraordinarily low, it probably is in the realm of 98% of people have ADHD for their lifetime. And then that 2% that doesn't is probably misdiagnosed. But anyways, back to this.
Yeah. No,
I'm off my
100%.
soapbox. So how did you feel about medication right away? Did you take it?
I cannot tell you.
You don't remember?
I can't report adequately how I felt on a day-to-day as a 10-year-old, but I do have little bursts of memory. I remember taking medication with Nurse Biggs, who was a saint. And I took medication at the same time that a kid, Preston, in my class took insulin. And I remember, Preston and I would meet at the same time. It was 3 times a day. And 2 of those, he needed insulin. And I remember thinking it was cool that I had a buddy to, take meds with.
To go to the nurse office with, yeah.
Yeah, to, go to the nurse's
get out of
office
class.
with. Yeah, I got to get out of class and, go do that. So it didn't strike me as awkward.
I had a hall pass, and I was like, okay, you could go and I found myself wandering around doing a whole bunch of other stuff, and then finally make it to the nurse's office. But no, but I remember myself, the first time I did take ADHD, I do remember this cloudiness just lifted, and I had this clarity of seeing things. And I remember that it was almost like I was in this mental fog or confusion, or kind of this barrage of thoughts all the time in my head. When I took the stimulant medication, I remember it just kind of slowed down and it kind of cleared. I remember almost watching my thoughts. I had this feeling that I could slow down and individually think about my thoughts now, instead of it feeling like this wave of thoughts over and over, these multiple thoughts piling up all the time. Okay. And I could just stop and let these things flow in front of me.
You did bring back a memory from my senior year of high school. So I'm jumping a little ahead of myself, but I was taking Ritalin LA at the time, so extended release. I do remember an English class where on Ritalin LA, I could sit back and let other people talk. I remember more actively listening to my classmates, and sort of definitely a more chill vibe. Unfortunately, as far as Ritalin the medication is concerned, my memories of it are more negative than positive, simply because it's been a long enough time that I don't really recall the nuance, the subtle nuance of how I felt on medication, as much as I remember the migraines I was getting every summer and the eating issue, the fact that I really had an erratic appetite.
But nonetheless, you persisted in taking that medication for quite a number of years, right?
I was taking Ritalin without a substantial break, and I refer to substantial as 6 months to a year for me.
Yeah.
Until I graduated college.
Wow.
So I was taking Ritalin from the age of 10 until 21 without taking a break longer than 3 months.
Wow.
And
now you take Adderall, right? You switched to Adderall.
So not to selfishly steal the focus from you, because that was some pretty deep shit. I want to get back to Aaron on Ritalin in the early days. I was taking Ritalin LA by the time I was in college, and by the time I was a junior or senior, I was taking it when I wanted to. It was very much in my control.
As needed.
Which meant
as needed for studying.
The phrase "as needed." But by my senior year, I was really toying with taking it and not taking it, and taking it and how do I feel, and how is my personality on it, off it, what happens when I take it and go to a bar with my friends on a Friday night and, drink like a college student and party like a college student. Are there any negative side effects? We'll come back to those. After I graduated, no Ritalin for 2 years.
So you kind of grappled with the question of,
what is it doing?
What is it doing for me, and do I need to be reliant on this substance forever? Do I need to be reliant on this medication forever?
Right. I ended up graduating and saying, I don't think so. I finished Carnegie and said, I'm going to take a break for 2 years and see if I can operate in New York.
And how did that work out for you?
It worked. There was no bleeding, there was no death, there was no train wreck. But you
went back on it for a reason.
I did. So
So it didn't obviously work out that well for you.
No, it wasn't a total success, but I had developed a pretty thick coat of armor with some pretty competitive classmates over 4 years.
So you developed
I
some
created
coping
mechanisms.
skills.
However, it was not perfect. And by the time Easter rolled around 2 years after I graduated, I went back on Ritalin. I immediately noticed an improvement in writing. I do a lot of, as in the art world, I do a lot of writing, short film, short story, poetry, etc. And I have this really fascinating bundle of like 5 to 10 poems and short journal entries the day I started, Easter 2015.
Yeah.
And that goes for about 10 days, where I'm essentially I'm reintroducing myself to Ritalin after being away from 2 years, and the writing is so clearly different than anything beforehand. It's electric, it's extremely fast, it's more aggressive, and then you can see my body over the period of about 10 plus days start to reconnect with the feeling, if that makes sense. Like I kind of slipped back into old Steven taking Ritalin, and it wasn't until meeting you, working with you in Greenwich, Connecticut, that you looked at me so surprised that I was still taking Ritalin. And I said, "What's the look for?" And you said, "You should probably try Adderall or some other medications." Ritalin's a really old form of ADHD medication. So under your discretion and my own, I borrowed an Adderall from you and tried it, and the effect was astronomical. The difference between Ritalin and Adderall was night and day. It was less of a harsh rise, it was less of a harsh fall. It was smoother just in general. It felt more relaxing. It felt more expansive. Ritalin can feel, and did feel for me, like a sharp knife, just a laser focus, hot burn. It was like a really hot burning gunpowder, just like, and then done.
Right. And obviously we're not advocating for people to share the medications or to do that kind of thing.
No, that's why I said.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was a one-time thing, and we're both are diagnosed, and you shouldn't share your medications. But anyways, I remember you saying that you had this sharp drop off and you were having some mood difficulties as you came down. Like you're feeling very moody and disgruntled and other things like that as you would come down from taking your Ritalin, as you're coming off of it. It's wearing off. Yeah. And that is one of the main reasons why Ritalin these days isn't being prescribed as much, especially for children, because one of the main side effects or features of Ritalin was always this sharp crash at the end of the day. And that's why there was this trend of re-upping kind of around after school time. So you take it in the morning, maybe you take it at noon, and then you'd have to take it again, after school. But that's a lot of maintenance, right? So today, now we have other medications. We have Focalin, which is still a methylphenidate, still the same class as Ritalin, but they formulate it a little bit differently. So kids these days don't have that sharp drop off, and it doesn't come down as harshly. Most of the time, kids are prescribed Focalin instead of the straight up Ritalin these days.
I didn't hear about Focalin until, I want to say, a year or two out of college.
It is, again, it's fairly new, so it's probably...
Right. By the time I was a senior in college, I had only heard of Adderall, Ritalin, Concerta, Strattera, Vyvanse, and that's it.
But you've only tried really 2, right? Which is...
So, no.
No.
Okay, this is a good story.
Oh.
So, in a small one, there was an 8-week-long camp that I used to go to, only 2 years. The first year, I was on Ritalin. And I am a very outgoing, outdoorsy guy. So, if you remember of the fact that most camp counselors are college kids, and it's an all-boys camp, so it's just like college dudes. So I was a gem the first year, and the second year, very different. We changed to Concerta. And it was the first time
you were on
trying
Concerta. Okay.
Yeah. And I was a different beast.
How old were you?
I was 11 and 12. The first year I was 11, second year I was 12. So I'd been taking Ritalin for 2 years, and we switched to Concerta that summer. And my parents decided to do that because it was a safe time to do so. It was the summer.
Kind of try it out.
It was a trial. And again, this camp was 6 weeks. For the first 3, I was a train wreck, Aaron. I was a train wreck. I was homesick. I was crying all the time. I don't say this as a badge of honor. I don't cry. I was crying for no reason at all. I was crying when I got a milkshake. I was crying when I like stepped out of my bunk bed and almost got hurt. You know, and so these counselors who knew me from the year before called my parents and they were like, Stephen is not the same that we remember from last year. Yeah, something's not right. And my mom, my dad were like, it's all good. We are trying this new medication. It's clearly not working. We're going to mail some Ritalin. And the second half of the summer camp, I was back to myself, my normal self.
And Concerta is, I believe, a methylphenidate as well, but it tends to be stronger than Focalin or Ritalin. And it's more of an extended release version. So you take it and it lasts for 12 hours, for a pretty long period of the time. It's one of the longest lasting ones.
Here's a fun fact about short acting versus fast acting, little interjection. I have a
short acting versus extended release. Yes.
Thank you. I have a close friend who takes extended release. Okay, I think she takes extended release Adderall.
Yeah.
And she drew a diagram for me of the layers of the pill and how the body metabolizes them at different times throughout the day and releases certain chemical mixtures per layer. And I had no idea that was the case. It always looks just like some like dots or some dust inside of a pill.
Yeah.
Right?
If you open up a pill of Adderall, any of these XR or extended release medications, you open it up, you look at it, there's different types of beads in there. Some of the beads are immediate release forms of the medication, and some are extended release. And you metabolize this pill in your gut, and it's a bit of a experiment that goes on in there because everyone's metabolism rate's a little bit different. So when someone has a very positive experience and your child maybe doesn't have the same positive experience, the same medication, the same amount, and you wonder, what is this about? That's something to consider, is that ADHD medications are not based on weight. So if your doctor tells you, well, your son's 80 pounds, therefore he takes this much, wrong. Wrong. Be suspicious of that doctor's be suspicious of that doctor's experience because ADHD medications are metabolized. So it's the rate of metabolism versus and the sensitivity to medications versus weight or height.
You know what we should do at the end of this? We should give ourselves, particularly you, actually, a minute to 2 just to list the no-nos and the pros and like if
like
you
a
hear
top
this,
10 or something.
Yeah, like the top 10. This is not correct. If you hear this, I think that's absolutely necessary for the end of this. But so Concerta was a total no-brainer. It was a
train wreck.
It was a train wreck. Don't go there. And it was immediate. I mean, these camp counselors had not changed, the same guys, and they observed a sharp decline in attitude.
So you've been on Ritalin, Concerta,
I believe we tried
Adderall
Strattera as well.
You tried Strattera too?
I believe so. I'll be honest that
you don't remember.
I'm 99% sure it was Concerta that summer, but it may have been Strattera. I just know that it was something outside of the field of Ritalin.
Okay.
And now I've tried Adderall, and I'm very, very comfortable and cozy with Adderall.
Okay. And just to finish up on this, I know that you're a film artsy type person. And was one of the reasons why you decided to kind of take this hiatus right after college because you felt like medications hindered your creativity?
During college, when I was a junior and senior, I mentioned earlier I was testing around. Some taking it, some nights not. My senior year as a directing major, I had a thesis, and my thesis was in the fall of my senior year, and you get a full-length play that I pitched to the teachers, and so I had a certain amount of time to rehearse and put it up. I made it a point to test my abilities as a director, my confidence as a director, my proficiency as a director on or off Ritalin at the time.
And what did you find?
I did this test twice, one sophomore year with acting and one senior year with directing. With directing, I didn't notice a big difference. And the reason is my support structure. So as a director, I had stage managers and production managers and dramaturgs. I had people helping me get things done, designers, etc. You're kind of captaining a ship, but you have many other heads of staff, essentially. Mm-hmm. So if I took Ritalin, I found I was more sharp. I might be a little more clever even, which is a gray area, but more concise thoughts and kind of quicker shooting from the hip with directing notes or ideas. Mm-hmm. But off Ritalin, I would go more absurd, way more impulsive. There'd be a lot more play with props and which sounds silly, but like shiny objects, like there'd be more stuff going on. But all of that was being curtailed by neurotypical team members, to be honest. Now, 2 years prior in acting classes, very different, very different. Taking medication, I would be in my head way more. So, and what that means for the actors and performers in the world, heady. So I'd be in a scene and I was commenting on the moment and I was in my head, my internal monologue was very loud. When I wasn't on Ritalin, I would lose myself into a scene. So my character was way more authentic, so to speak, because I wasn't commenting. I would let go. We had a teacher who said, hold on tightly, let go lightly. On Ritalin, I held on tightly. On off Ritalin, I let go lightly. And the performances were better.
And that's a very important point, because I think this is actually one of the main side effects of a stimulant medication, is that sometimes it can increase your self-monitoring. It can increase some of the underlying insecurity or doubts or anxieties that some people have. Not to say that you had these things. I'm just stating the general now.
Totally.
That for some folks, it increases those underlying tendencies. So if you have this anxiety already, then being on a stimulant medication, it can exacerbate those symptoms. So that's one of the things to be careful about. So as you move up, more medication isn't always better medication.
Right.
More Ritalin, if it works at this level, doesn't mean we should up the dose to the next 10 milligrams or 5 milligrams, because as you increase the dose, you also increase the likelihood of side effects. So that's a thing. And I'll just say this for parents, that the top thing to do when you're talking to your physician about ADHD medications and how to find the right dose, first thing, make sure to start low. Start the lowest possible amount, lowest possible milligram dosage.
5 and 5. When I was 5 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 5 milligrams.
And you can look up, as a parent, you can look up a chart. They have charts online. We'll probably post this as well in the show notes. But there's charts of all the ADHD medications and the recommended dosages and how those break down. So the beginning, the starter dose is usually a very low amount, and then you titrate that up. You move it up gradually over time. So a week, 2 weeks, a month on that dose, you move it up until you start getting to the place where side effects outweigh the benefits. So the benefits increase as the medication increases, but also the side effects. And at some point, the side effects go above the benefits.
Oh, okay.
And then what you do is you drop it down. You increase, you titrate it up all the way to the point at which the benefits are high, but the side effects are getting high. And then all of a sudden, side effects are too much. My appetite is decreased. It's affecting my sleep.
Right.
I'm feeling jittery. I'm feeling kind of like a zombie or not like myself. Those are all warning signs, warning flags that you're over medicated, because you shouldn't feel that way. My experience with medications, I was on Ritalin and Wellbutrin early on, grade school, through middle school, early high school. And in high school, I stopped taking medicine consistently. I'd take it kind of as needed because like you said, the prevailing wisdom at the time was you don't want to take this all the time. You take it as a study enhancement, or you take it as needed but you take summer vacations off, right? You've probably heard these like medication vacations in the summer, and that was recommended when we were growing up a lot. And even still today it's recommended, but that's not
right.
That
the
is
medication
not
vacations. Right. Yes.
That is not what most competent experts recommend these days, because they actually suggest that you shouldn't do these medication vacations.
Yeah, that's why I experience those migraines.
Right, because medication or ADHD does not go away in the summer. So I'll just say that is not the way to go. For me in college, I switched to Adderall because I hadn't heard about it until I got into college. Other students were taking Adderall, and I was like, Adderall. I guess I've never tried this. I don't know if it works, but I know I didn't quite like Ritalin. It always felt like I crashed on Ritalin. So I decided to try Adderall in college.
At the beginning of college, or was this pre-college or during college?
Beginning college is when I first switched to Adderall.
Okay.
Yeah. And I found a huge benefit. So, and I didn't know about extended release Adderall. I just did immediate release Adderall. But
what year was that?
For me, it was, I think, like 2001, 2002-ish.
Interesting.
2002, I believe, something like that.
Which is the moment I'm getting diagnosed and being prescribed Ritalin in Texas.
Interesting.
For all of those listening at home, that was an age gap.
That's an age gap. Yes, we're aging me here.
Didn't mean to, but at the moment you were switching from Ritalin, which wasn't working, to Adderall, I was being prescribed Ritalin.
Yes.
So that's okay. That's cool though. So you started an Adderall and immediately positive reaction.
Right. But it wasn't that I always liked Adderall, because I always had this push-pull the same as you, where I felt that it inhibited some of my creative potential and impulses as well. And I didn't like all the time how it made my personality feel, because I'd get stuck in these kind of hyper-focused bubbles, or I'd feel like I'd be paying attention to all these minute things that maybe I should pay attention to. But other things, like it heightens your attentiveness, but it also heightens your attentiveness to things that it doesn't heighten your discretion abilities, right? It helps you focus, but it doesn't help you prioritize, and it doesn't help you practice good discretion in what you're focusing on. So sometimes I could over-focus on the wrong things versus focus on the right things, and I'd go down a rabbit hole of focus. And I didn't always like who I was on medication. But that said, I had times when I went on and off of it. But I've made the decision to also, like you, continue with medication, because when you weigh the benefits versus, and this is a personal decision for everyone, weighing the benefits versus the side effects.
And your career, your vocation, your
right.
All context, all variables.
I have tried going without, and I have tried doing it. And I don't think it's a weakness. I don't think it's something you need to feel bad about and like, oh, why do I need to depend on this medication?
No,
and trust
that's
me,
so important to say.
We both have gone through this, and we both understand that need and the desire to not want to be reliant on any kind of substance.
It directly, like one-to-one. The decision to not take it was an insecurity that I was dependent on something.
Right. And of course, no one wants that. And the same parents, they don't want to prescribe something that's not necessary, right? What kind of parent wants to give their kid a pill if it's not needed? If your child was squinting at the board and couldn't see in class, would you just tell that child to squint harder? No. You'd go and get them glasses. It's simply allowing yourself to have a chance to thrive and to strive and to learn in a way that you're kind of getting that handicap removed. Everyone else is starting that race a lap ahead, and you're getting a bit of a boost. They're starting that timer a little bit faster for you.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of way that I look at it, is that yes, it's helpful, But as Ari Tuckman says,
Yeah.
pills don't teach skills.
Right.
So that's where the other piece comes in. If you take medications, that's not where the start and the stop is. That's not the magic bullet or the magic solution to anything. So just because you go in, you get a prescription doesn't mean, okay, we're good. Yes, you need to use that as a starting place to figure out coping mechanisms, to get therapy, coaching, other forms of help, to learn life skills and learn ways to control these executive functioning difficulties that come along with ADHD. Top 5 tips about medication. Excellent. Ready, go. All right. Coming in at number 5, medication vacations. That is not the way to do it. ADHD does not go away in the summer, and it doesn't just affect you with studying.
Contrary to popular belief.
Contrary to popular belief. So if your doctor says that, do not listen.
Nope.
Number 4, find the right medication and know the difference between the classes of medication, stimulants versus non-stimulants. Educate yourself.
Check yourself
before you wreck yourself.
Amen, brother.
Number 3, find the right dose. Start low and move up from there. Titrate it up steadily and slowly.
Titrate. Bring it down.
Number 2, explore the alternatives to medication, which include
exercise, mindfulness, meditation,
diet, and supplements,
sleep,
to name a few. All right.
Yeah.
And number 1, pills don't teach skills.
Amen.
Find other help and other strategies to help yourself, and that includes therapy, coaching, and other types of strategies to mitigate the symptoms.
Avoid, medicate it, and forget it.
Exactly. All right.
Great. Okay, so before we close out, I just wanted to wrap up by saying this topic is beefy. We will be coming back. We'll be circling back to this discussion often, frequently, and a lot. There will not just be one more episode. There will be many more episodes about medication, other forms of treatment, more anecdotes from Aaron and I about our experiences with medicating and other forms of treatment. So please tune back in. This is episode 7, right? Mm-hmm. So episode 15, episode 18, right, 27.
Just leave it.
32, 48, 112.
We're gonna come back
205, 309.
All right.
1008. Okay, we're done.
All right.
To medicate or not to medicate?
That is the question.
That is the question.
You see what I mean? You got to be crazy. Too late to be sane. You got to go full tilt bozo. Because you're only given a little spark of that. We are attention. If you lose that, you're nothing.
Attention. Pay attention.